Are you happy now, Mikhail?
Yeah, I heard that from here, actually.
Maybe because I'm right behind you.
I'm pretty sure you're not. There's a wall back there.
Well, he could still be physically behind you.
Thank you.
Okay, fine.
Come on, physicist.
I thought we were gonna get rid of all the semantic arguments.
There's a big difference between a semantic critique and 40 minutes on the definition of sarcasm.
It'll be Operation Have a Conversation, a study in semantics. Just so everyone knows, Jack and Mikhail had no idea that I was about to show them this essay, and so I've read it a bunch of times, and they have no idea what's in it. So with that, let's talk. So I have a proposal for the topic of today, which is education.
Education how? Like pros and cons?
What are the pros and cons of education? I am generally for education, yes. I am going to start, if it's okay with you.
Just do it.
Okay, we're good.
Lockhart's Lament.
Yes, it's my favorite piece of writing on education that I've ever read.
Oh god, do I have to read all of it?
Oh, it's very long. Yes.
It's
it is.
25 pages.
Yeah.
I'm not reading this.
What I'm going to do, if it's okay with you, I'm going to read the first page or so out loud.
Only if you do it with gusto.
I will.
Okay.
Okay. A musician wakes from a terrible nightmare. In his dream, he finds himself in a society where music education has been made mandatory. We are helping our students become more competitive in an increasingly sound-filled world. Educators, school systems, and the state are put in charge of this vital project. Studies are commissioned, committees are formed, and decisions are made, all without the advice or participation of a single working musician or composer. Since musicians are known to set down their ideas in the form of sheet music, these curious black dots and lines must constitute the language of music. It is imperative that students become fluent in this language if they are to attain any degree of musical competence. Indeed, it would be ludicrous to expect a child to sing a song or play an instrument without having a thorough grounding in music notation and theory. Playing and listening to music, let alone composing an original piece, are considered very advanced topics and are generally put off until college, and more often graduate school. As for the primary and secondary schools, their mission is to train students to use this language, to jiggle symbols around according to a fixed set of rules. Music class is where we take out our staff paper, our teacher puts some notes on the board, and we copy them or transpose them into a different key. We have to make sure to get the clefs and key signatures right, and our teacher is very picky about making sure we fill in our quarter notes completely. One time we had a chromatic scale problem, and I did it right, but the teacher gave me no credit because I had the stems pointing the wrong way. So I'm all in it there. What the guy's basically doing, if it's not clear, is basically saying this is exactly what math education is right now. Math education is we are just a bunch of people who have no idea what math is have decided that it's mandatory because math is everywhere and there's no way to do math unless you know all the notation and you build from the ground up in this very particular way. And you don't know how to actually do math until you get into college, and even then you may not ever do it. You may not ever do it, and it just kind of goes on and on. So I'm curious how you guys kind of respond to this viewpoint of math education specifically.
So right off the bat, Mark and I are both TAs for a program where young kids that are very proficient at math for their age come the University of Minnesota, and they effectively take college algebra, college geometry, and pretty much prep to take calculus by the time they're in high school. I just finished my first semester of TAing their algebra class. They go months on end learning the tricks of algebra without looking at a single graph of what the function actually is, which is one of the only ways that you can actually get an intuitive understanding of what you're working on. When I've talked to the instructor, and he says that it frustrates him to no end that he is forced by the curriculum to go however quickly so they can get through all the material so that they can pass the test. He's unable to show them things that would help them to get a better understanding for what they're actually learning and maybe even actually appreciate it, not just memorize how to do the problems.
Yeah.
So I would say that that's a perfect example of what Lockhart is talking about.
So I have a response. I want to first point out that mathematics is not music. Now, it does draw a lot of parallels that I think are good things to think about, but I mean, this is kind of a fundamental flaw with analogies is that they have to break down at some point. Music and math are different subjects, and I think it makes sense that you have to teach different subjects in a different way. Now, I'm not saying that the way music or math is taught generally is the correct way to teach it. I'm not sure if there is a correct way, but I don't think that many people would agree that the way math is taught right now is the best way. It starts out with arithmetic, like adding, subtracting, dividing, multiplying, and then you move on to geometry, and then they'll be taught algebra.
And then trigonometry.
Yeah, pre-calc, stuff like that. There are different ways to teach math that get taught. Like, all of us went to a school where the integrated math system was used. You get taught multiple things at the same time. But I think it's still a system in which this analogy that Lockhart is making will hold. Like, I think it's still a fair comparison.
Can I jump in and make a point about integrated math? Because I was going to bring that up until you brought it up.
Let's do it.
Yeah, so the integrated math system, rather than in a lot of schools where you would take, a semester on algebra, and then they deem you worthy to look at shapes on the board, so you take geometry, and then from there you get to go into higher levels, but you learn everything in big chunks without any sort of overlap, which is not really conducive with how math actually works. You need a firm understanding of algebra in order to do complicated geometric problems or trigonometric problems, and so the ordering makes sense to start with algebra and move forward, but it would be a great practice to be able to apply your algebra to situations that you can visualize like geometry or trig while you're learning the concepts to help them make more sense maybe, or it gives you more options for problems. And so I thought that the integrated math system was far superior to the more separated system of doing subject by subject, but I do think that a lot of the applications of the integrated math system so far in math education have been flawed, and I'm not going to make any claims of what I think the right way to teach it would be, but I do think there were still glaring issues with the curriculum that was laid out by the integrated math system, not the least of which was that as opposed to higher level textbooks where you can look through the text and find example problems and see worked out work and sort of be able to learn from the book yourself was completely absent in integrated math. If you didn't have an instructor or somebody who already knew the material with you, you couldn't sit down and read this textbook, do all the problems in it, and understand what was in it. You would never know whether you were right, and it was just kind of a mess.
I would like to move away from the integrated math for just a little bit because I want to ask Mark.
Mm-hmm.
In Lockhart's Lament, he made the comparison of math to music, and he says that in his Nightmare, the composition of music was generally left until college. Now, what is the analogous activity in math that is left to college? Because I am having trouble figuring that out.
Being able to explore any mathematical concept whatsoever at all on your own or in class.
Can you give me an example?
Anything.
Literally everything that happens in math class. Did you ever learn how to derive why the area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height?
Maybe I'm not sure exactly how strict of a definition you're looking for, because to me, the area of the triangle, when they said that, I was like, well, of course. Yeah, that's how it has to be.
It's intuitive for certain triangles, but it's definitely not for others. I see where Mark's point is that it's not intuitive that for any triangle you could draw the hypothetical extrapolated rectangle and say, oh, this is half.
Yeah, like if it's an obtuse rectangle where one vertex sticks way out over in front of another vertex.
I guess I always just visualize a parallelogram around the triangle, and then I see that the hypotenuse of the triangle always cuts that parallelogram in half.
Yes, but who gave you that image? Was it drawn on a board in class? Did you
Yes.
come up with it? It was drawn on a board?
The example that I remember was seeing a right triangle, so it was a rectangle. I guess I don't remember exactly, but I feel like I might have made the jump from a rectangle to a parallelogram, because then it would work for like a scalene triangle as well.
Oh, scalene.
This is what Lockhart's trying to point out, is that you should not have been given that derivation or anything like that. That's taking out the creative process that is math. What I'm going to do, I'm going to respond to one of the first things you said, Mikhail, which is, well, math is not music. I'm going to respond with Lockhart's exact words, okay?
Okay.
Which is on page 3, if anyone's interested. He says, the first thing to understand is that mathematics is an art. The difference between math and the other arts, such as music and painting, is that our culture does not recognize it as such.
Okay.
So his kind of thesis is that math should be viewed as an art, as a creative process, and that as far as society is concerned, we just don't recognize it because it's been destroyed in the way that we teach it, has been so devoid of anything interesting that nobody knows what math is. People think they know what math is because they take things that are called math classes, but what's happening in those classes is exactly what math isn't.
Well, now I'm thinking through this, and I will say that I can see how math can be considered an art, because I have seen equations that are beautiful. I've seen graphs produced by, some sort of mathematical concept that are beautiful. Fractals, for example, I find those very visually appealing, and I would consider those a type of art. I guess in my mind, then, if math is art, then a couple of dominoes start to fall, and I start to think, well, physics is applied math. Would physics be art? And I could see that it could be considered art, but then I'm just feeling like it's a slippery slope, because then which of the STEM fields isn't art? Because then is just everything art?
The line that I draw between art and perhaps other fields, like your example, like physics or other STEM fields, the reason that I would think that those are not art is that a lot of the time their work is done for the sake of practicality or advancement, while there is a large portion, like some of mathematics is very applied, obviously. I mean, there are mathematicians that are doing things for companies and for industry and et cetera, but a lot of mathematics is done for the sake of the mathematics, simply because people want to see where mathematics can go, just like how artists push the boundaries of their medium to try and make some sort of statement, I guess.
So, Jack, you're getting much closer to what Lockhart is getting at. While I agree with a lot of things that Lockhart says, I don't agree with everything. I'm just going to keep responding with his words because he addresses all these points very carefully. So, Mikhail, responding to you, the art of math is not in pretty pictures or pretty formulas. But Lockhart says, the art is not in the truth, but in the explanation, the argument. It is the argument itself which gives the truth its context and determines what is really being said and meant. Mathematics is the art of explanation. So for me, a pretty picture, so to speak, in math, like something that's actually visually appealing, would be like a no-word proof. A proof that is just a picture and everything kind of falls into place from that. It's not because the picture itself is aesthetically pleasing. I'm not going to put it up on my wall because I'm like, those are some nicely shaded triangles. It's because it's so concise and so well formulated that that's where the beauty is. Someone had to be very creative and intuitive about what's going on to be able to create that argument.
It's like how people say that one of the most beautiful pieces of mathematics is e to the pi I plus 1 equals 0. It's not like that expression itself is visually appealing in the way that a painting would be, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't have a resounding meaning that people find, I don't know.
Well, it's about what it says. It's not like you said, it doesn't it's a nice concise formula. If you know what the numbers are, you're kind of astounded that exists.
Yeah.
But that's not where the beauty is. The beauty is that we're relating these transcendental numbers with these imaginary numbers like in this very weird way, and it's showing a very deep connection between complex numbers and trigonometric functions. Like all this stuff is going on, and that's where the beauty is the simplicity of that statement that contains so much other stuff.
So you're saying that the art isn't in the pretty pictures, which, I mean, I like pretty pictures, but I get what you're saying, like, it's not what it says, it's what it means. I think I'm now starting to understand why there are so many proofs for things that have already been proven. This is making more sense, because I had always thought that it was kind of silly to prove something that's already been proved, because I was like, it's already been done. We know that it's true. But now I think I'm getting it, because there are so many different ways to prove it. The art is in the argument.
Yes.
Would you say that math is similar to the art of debate?
I would say that it's an art. The point that I was going to make earlier is that part of why you can justify mathematics as an art is the same reason that you can justify that music and, say, like physical paintings and murals and statues are both art, even though they are enjoyed completely differently. There's no visual aspect of music that is pleasing, but yet there's still a beauty there in their meaning that goes much deeper than the more esoteric. I think I use esoteric wrong every time I use it, so I'm going to Google it.
Esoteric, it's the word of the day.
Word of the day?
I'm thinking of a word like esoteric that means surface level, but it's definitely not esoteric. I think esoteric is the opposite of that.
Exoteric?
Oh, nice.
Is that a word?
That's a word.
Nice.
That's the exact opposite of esoteric. You're incredible, Mikhail.
Yay, Latin roots. Or is that one Greek?
Well, that's not for now.
Okay,
Yeah, I don't care.
Whatever.
Put it in the show notes.
But yeah, there's a depth to it that goes beyond the exoteric qualities of the work itself. And it takes, I think, a greater level of analysis to really see the beauty in it, which is how you can say that mathematics is an art, because a deeper understanding of what mathematics is saying allows it to be more beautiful, just like a greater understanding of how music is produced and created and its limits allows you to better appreciate a piece of music after hearing it for the first time.
Okay, so I think there's an idea forming in my mind, because I'm trying to draw some boundaries of art in my mind. And I don't know if that's necessarily a good idea, but it's just something that I gravitate towards, is trying to find where are the endpoints for this concept. I'm thinking that there might need to be a distinction between math that is art and math that isn't, because what I'm thinking of is there is also something like this in all of the sciences, because I've seen physics that is pretty much just for physics. It's not really a practical application, at least in anybody's lifetime that we'll ever know, but people think about it anyway. I'm thinking very specifically of Einstein's thought experiment of if you could go the speed of light. And that thought experiment has some amazing conclusions to it, which I'm forgetting the specifics of, but there's not a whole lot of practicality in that statement. It's more just like a very nice argument that he made. But then again, there's the side of physics which is completely practical. And I think maybe that just exists in everything. There is music that is absolutely beautiful, and then I think there's also music that has a very practical purpose. And I guess my example would be jingles for advertisements.
First of all, I just want to know where you think that line is drawn in math, like where you'd put that kind of distinction between math that is art and math that isn't. And then the other responsive question would be, so if that jingle is not meant to be art because it's written, just for money or whatever, to what extent do you define that to be music, or something like you would present to a music class or something as an example of music?
I think I might need to backtrack a little bit here. I feel like it's not a line. That would be too simple. Maybe it's just more of a spectrum. Even with the most annoying jingles that are very just practical, they just like want you to remember this specific thing. There is kind of an art to that, and if they do it really well, then that can be beautiful in some sense of the word.
I think that that's a reasonable stance to take, but and that's the thing. Obviously, all this is very subjective, of course, and I think that the reason you pointed out right away that analogies will break down, and of course they will, but I think that it's more about the analogy between math and art as a whole than like math and music specifically.
If you're comparing math to art and making the argument that it should be taught as if it was an art, then I think you need to include pretty much every other subject. Because I don't see why you could draw the line between math and the rest of the sciences, or even history or language arts, any of those. I think inherently every single subject is going to be at least a little bit like art and at least a little bit practical, some more one than the other.
But so my response to that is math is really the main subject, other than you could say languages, but languages are kind of a totally separate issue here. I would say that every other subject has an element of the creative process. Math is the only one that doesn't. In chemistry and physics and biology, although there is a lot of rote learning, you at least get the opportunity to do experiments. Even if they're somewhat contrived, you're still doing the experiment. You still have the opportunity to learn something about the process of doing that sort of science. In things like history, at least like for the AP classes, we had the opportunity to do kind of our own research on stuff and investigate certain topics and teach those to the class, which is a big part of what history is finding information and distilling it in a novel way.
Oh.
Right? And in literature, in English, the big part of that is investigating themes, stuff in books that connects with you, and explaining what the author was trying to say or just what it means to you and what someone can take out of it. These are all exploratory processes that just do not exist in math classes, at least not in most math classes that exist right now.
I think I'm starting to see where you're trying to go with this, because I do see now in history I had exploratory things where I was told to go off on my own and research a certain topic and come back with some distilled information and present it. And in literature classes, you did something similar where you would read a passage and you would try to make some sort of statement about what it might mean. But I can see how math would be the last subject that you would expect to do any sort of exploration, at least before a college level.
Well, I think you're slightly misinterpreting what I mean by exploring, and part of it is because that's a poor word choice.
Okay.
So, for example, in physics and chemistry, you do experiments. You have the opportunity to do the thing.
Oh.
Physics and chemistry are, by definition, experimental, natural and physical sciences that require experiments to actually do what you're doing. And even if it's somewhat contrived in high school, you technically are still doing that. They teach you a lot about things like errors because high schoolers are very likely to have errors in their labs and have to learn how to deal with them and how to minimize them and how to explain them and all this stuff. But in math, there's no class that I've ever heard of someone taking before college that allows for anything where you are engaging in the process of the subject that professionals in that field would also be doing.
I would say that it's not a very big example, but I do remember doing proofs in high school. And I know that's not exactly the same as doing some sort of experiment in a physics or chemistry lab, but I would say that's slightly closer. It's much less than the other subjects. I think I'm understanding now where math is this kind of odd thing out where you don't really ever do anything like that to an appreciable degree.
So, first of all, let me say I love you for providing me the segue that I'm about to take.
Okay.
So, proofs, namely statement reason proofs in geometry, I assume, right?
I don't
know.
remember any geometry. It was mainly logic.
You did proofs in things that weren't geometry in like high school math?
Yeah, it was like,
You do that in like algebra and pre-calc and stuff.
yeah.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Like what?
It was like word problems. Like
Oh,
if,
word problems aren't proofs. What do you mean?
no, what I mean it was a proof about a word problem. Like if this person's taller than this person, and this person is older than this person, then like who has a dog? I don't know.
Like logic puzzles?
It was framed as a logic puzzle, except it was very formal in the way that we had to approach them. And we had to prove every single concept that we used, except for a very small set of, I think they're called axioms.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was something like that. So over the unit, we started off with like these very few axioms, and then we had to prove other. What do you call them? Not axioms, but like.
Theorems, propositions, lemmas, whatever.
Okay, yeah, you had to go through and prove those sorts of things, and then you could use those to prove other things. And I don't know.
So, what I'll say is that sounds like the equivalent of doing integrals or just solving equations. Like, you're just practicing a thing, you're not doing it.
So what's the difference?
The math would be actually giving that motivation yourself, not being given this just problem that sounds completely contrived and awfully boring, and being forced to quote unquote rigorously prove things from these axioms for no apparent reason, and you're not left any room for creativity.
Well, now that we're this far into it, can you please explain to me his solution? Because I'm really interested.
He doesn't provide a solution. It's not a mathematician's solution. It's a mathematician's lament.
Okay.
The ideal world is that math would be treated like an art, in that it's not going to be required. They're not going to attempt to provide you with a motivation to learn it like they often attempt to do. Trying to tell you, oh yeah, you're going to use this at some point. Like, you won't. You almost for sure won't.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a fact.
If you don't go into a STEM field, you will never use it.
Yeah. It comes down to treating it in a way where it can be done from a pure source, which is using something called the Moore method of learning math, which is essentially where the teacher kind of guides stuff a little bit and kind of reflects back on the students, but ultimately they're just doing everything on their own. They're trying to derive things. They're creating their own arguments and throwing them back at each other and helping each other build up on these things. Because math really isn't hierarchical like we try and make it. It's completely arbitrary just for the purposes of standardized testing. And obviously, just like with all education, standardized testing is the bane of education's existence. Mm-hmm. It just kind of ruins it all. but math in particular, because it's created this idea that math is about facts when it's not. It's about explanation.
That's fair. I feel like that ties it almost back into the more practical sciences that we were differentiating from math earlier. But I think, in my mind, a lot of what separates math from the harder sciences, and this applies to specific niches within the more practical sciences, I would think, where the hard sciences, even at times when they are abstract, they are creating a structure for an abstraction that already exists, where mathematics and other arts create a new abstract of their own, like a new way of thinking, a new perspective that didn't exist before, while more practical things like physics or engineering are going to be creating concrete representations in the physical world of things that have already been thought about. You're not creating the concepts and creating the field, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Let me give you a quote that Lockhart uses.
Oh, of course. Textual evidence.
G.H. Hardy, who was a British mathematician famous for helping bring Ramanujan to England, and if you don't know who Ramanujan is, look him up.
I know who Ramanujan is, don't worry.
So G.H. Hardy said, "A mathematician, like a painter or poet, is a maker of patterns. If his patterns are more permanent than theirs, it is because they are made with ideas."
I like it.
There you go. Now let me real quick, I didn't get the segue that I ended up wanting from Mikhail, because you turned a 180 on me and started talking about these logic obnoxious proofs that I've never heard of, and then said that you've never heard of doing a proof in high school geometry, which is literally all that it was.
Okay, well, I guess I just didn't know that they were called proofs at the time.
Oh, what? Like proving that that two triangles are congruent?
Do you remember CPCTC, Mikhail?
Yes.
Those are proofs.
Well, sure, they're two-column proofs.
All right, well, now I know.
So let me tell you what Lockhart has to say about it. Page 18 for anyone who wants to reference. The bold title of this section of the essay is called High School Geometry, Instrument of the Devil. There is nothing quite so vexing to the author of a scathing indictment as having the primary target of his venom offered up in his support, and never was a wolf in sheep's clothing as insidious, nor a false friend as treacherous as high school geometry. It is precisely because it is school's attempt to introduce students to the art of argument that makes it so very dangerous.
But why?
Well, should I continue reading, or should I try and spark note it on the fly?
Spark noted on the fly.
Okay, so going back to basically what I said about your logic proof things, you're basically given one option, which is derived from these axioms, and either you're right or you're wrong, and you can only really be right or wrong in one way. The arguments that you're allowed to give, arguing from axioms, are pretty boring.
It's a very subjective word.
So I will define boring here as there's really only one option.
Okay.
That's a funny definition of boring, but I accept it.
In this case, when it comes to a proof in math, it's boring if there's only one way to do it, right? Which is why, like, proofs of the Pythagorean theorem, not boring, because there's like 400 documented proofs of the Pythagorean theorem. So the issue with the high school geometry things, especially statement reason proofs, your two-column proofs, is because they allow for nothing except for rigidity and saying, oh yes, angle 3 is equivalent to angle 2 because of alternative interior angles, and blah, 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 blah. You know, like, it's just so stupid and boring, and they teach you everything that math isn't. It's the ultimate reinforcement that math is just this cold, merciless, horrifying subject that is full of robots, when it isn't. Like, if you were to look at my math homework now in advanced classes, there are paragraphs of prose that I write to convince the reader that I know what I'm talking about and that something's true.
If you can't explain it with math, just write it down.
This begs the question for me, is there a subject which is taught in high school that is an accurate representation of what that field actually is.
I am going to go out on a limb and just say no, just because tests exist, and specifically standardized tests, and almost every field does not work like a standardized test. And so almost by definition, there is no real accurate representation. There may be glimpses of it.
Maybe I should just read this document at some point.
It's really good. It's really funny at times, too. He's a very good writer.
All right. So I guess what I'm saying is it isn't math specifically, but the education system as a whole. Math is just a very easy thing to hold up and say, this is why these things are wrong.
It's not even that math is kind of a good archetype for the whole thing. It totally is. It's that it's gotten to the point where math is probably the most hated subject in school. That's the issue, is that people hate math because they don't understand what it is. They brag about not knowing any math. You know, no one brags about how poorly they did in history classes. No one brags that they're illiterate. You know, but people will brag to you, I was so bad in math. Math was the worst. I hated it, had bad math teachers, whatever.
I'm going to stop you there because I have heard people say that, you know, they didn't do so well in history class, and that somehow excuses them from knowing when World War II happened.
That's a funny example. I like that a lot.
That was good. I can definitely picture people in my life who would say something like that.
Exactly. The moment he said it, it just resonated with me. Yes. I was like, oh. I hate when people just don't know when very, very important historical events happen that happen. They're like, I know you learned about in school 4 times.
Yeah.
Like, over the course of your years. Oh, but anyway.
But I think the main issue is not even that people brag about doing poorly. It's that people brag about not needing to know it more than anything else. Have you ever met someone who goes around to people and is like, oh man, when do I ever need to use those piano lessons? Man, that was a total waste, and I hate that I ever had to do it, and who made me do that? I mean, sure, people complain about piano lessons, but no one's walking around
bringing it up on their own.
Yeah, how unimportant it was to their development as a person and how worthless it is to them in life right now.
So you're frustrated that math is the scapegoat of the problems with the education system in general.
I don't know if I would call it a scapegoat. I don't think that's exactly what he's saying.
But like it's the thing that people point to when they should be pointing to the entire picture.
That's definitely a part of it, but I don't know if that's the point he's trying to make.
I'm just trying to say that to me it sounds like, okay, I'm going to simplify your argument here, I'm sorry, but I'm going to say that you're just frustrated that math gets the brunt of the opposition to how education works in the Western world.
I mean, that is a frustration, but that's not what I'm trying to focus on. The frustration is not that math is getting an unfair rap in comparison to other subjects. It's that everyone is convinced, including people in STEM fields, are convinced that they understand what math is and what mathematicians do, and they just don't, and they feel entitled to make certain commentary or develop the curriculum or whatever it may be without understanding what it is, and that's exactly what discourages people from going into math or math-related fields, is that nobody understands what it is. The issue with STEM education is not that we're not providing enough opportunities. There are plenty of opportunities to get people into STEM fields and to increase their awareness and encourage them. The issue is that math has become so misconstrued that it turns people off. Or even worse, they're very good at the whole memorize and do problems, and then once they get to a real math class where they actually have to do math, they completely fall on their face because they didn't understand that that's what it actually was.
I totally agree with that. where there are people that got by in the classes where it's problem solving from a template, not problem solving from an analytical method in a way. The problems were simple enough, I guess, if you can call calculus 1 and 2 simple, or even 1 through 4, I guess, where you see a problem and you think, I've seen this or something incredibly similar before with different numbers and different variables. I think I can do this based on that, like almost rote memory. Whereas as you go farther and farther in a field, it gets to the point where you are actually having to solve a problem by simply using the concepts that you understand that may not seem like they are connected regarding a certain subject until you encounter a problem in which you have to use everything that you know.
The issue is not that people in like calculus classes get by doing problems because they memorize the formulas. The problem is that the class is about memorizing the formulas. That's the problem. It's not how people pass the class and then fall on their faces if they think that they're good at math. The farther reaching issue is that all of their education up to this point has been telling them math is only about memorizing formulas. And so if you memorize enough formulas and know how to use them well enough, you can do math with the best of them. That's not math. It's this entire misrepresentation that is bothersome and worrisome because it turns so many people off from math.
That's true. I definitely see that happening with a lot of people, where you can almost tell that they do have the mind to understand and appreciate math, but none of the drive, because their perception of what math is skewed by how it has been instructed to them. Like, they clearly know it, they can clearly do it. Like, you face them with a problem that they haven't really seen before, and they can kind of work through it. They have a bit of the intuition, but then at the end of the problem, they say, I don't like this. I don't like doing this. I'm like, well, yeah, because it was just a template. You didn't, you didn't really solve anything. I don't know. It's very frustrating. And I mean, it's easy to look back and say, oh, it was such a bad program, but still made me enjoy math somehow. Like, I came out of it fine. You both came out of it fine. If not liking math means you're not fine, which I guess is subjective.
Yes, while I technically came out of it fine, I still always feel like I've spent so much time doing what I thought was math that it took quite a bit of turning around to realize what I actually had to do in my math major. I was very ill prepared for a lot of things. Oh, well, I'm taking this one math class where I actually have to do proofs. I'm doing math, more or less.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then there are still these upper division math classes where it really is just more computation and boringness without really learning anything. Like, I think I told you probably, Jack, and you, Mikhail, class that I took last spring, the algebraic geometry class, that probably any decent 10th or 11th grader probably could have passed that class with at least a B. Because there was nothing novel in it. It was just, here are a few algorithms to memorize.
Oh.
So, Mikhail, you've been awfully quiet.
Yeah, it's made me think some pretty big thoughts.
That's what we're all about here.
I agree.
One of the big thoughts that I'm having is, what is the point? Specifically, what is the point of education? What are we trying to do?
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, it just keeps going back to a way to keep people busy.
That is so cynical.
Teach kids to not be animals.
Teach us to not be animals and also babysit us so our parents can go out and
contribute
and get money so that they can provide for this person, this little person.
This is such a cynical viewpoint. This is so funny. I love this. It's just so much just like, all this book learning is just to keep me docile.
Tell me I'm wrong, Jack. Please.
I mean,
I would love to have a different viewpoint.
I have the more optimistic viewpoint that the intended purpose of our educational system, although it may not be perfectly actualized in its current form, is to create a population of contributors so that innovation is spurred by an increase in number of ideas. That is what I think education is supposed to be. And I assume both of you agree with me and are just making points on how it actually is, not how it's intended.
I think most people would agree with you, Jack, that yes, the intended purpose of public education is to create a liberally educated and well-developed workforce to blah, 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 blah. Right?
Yeah.
The issue is that there's just this dissonance between how we value education in the abstract and how we value it in reality. And especially how we value educators. Who are we paying and how much are we paying them to actually enact these things? Well, not a lot. And is because the public says, yes, we want an educated workforce, but no, we will not provide enough compensation and materials and all this stuff to make it a reality for the population.
I agree with you completely. We say we value it, but then we don't objectively value it, which is frustrating,
Yeah.
to say the least.
It's making me sad because the only thing I'm hearing is, well, why can't everyone just try harder? And you're trying to change how people act inside a system. And I don't think it's very easy or even possible to do that. The only way to change how people act is to change the system in which they are in. Because I believe that the system in which a person is interacting dictates their behavior.
You're forgetting the other solution, Mikhail.
Burn them all, burn the witches.
Change the makeup of the population.
So now we're talking eugenics.
You said it, not me.
More social Darwinism.
We were all thinking it.
I just said it. But I think that you are correct, Mikhail, that it is very much a system-wide thing. But it's, obviously we're going to try and get into this whole, let's
fix the world, guys.
Well, what's one main big issue? Well, our consumption of things like athletics and that sort of stuff that certain people are paid a lot to provide absolutely nothing.
I wouldn't say absolutely nothing.
Well, okay, as far as value to, let's say, society,
That's very subjective.
I'm making a stance here, Mikhail.
Okay.
If all of the athletes on Earth and all of the athletic institutions disappeared right now, would their lasting impact on society's progress be evident?
I think a lot of people would freak out. Like, where did all these people go?
Well, neglecting that
Mikhail.
clear problem with the analogy.
Exactly. Your analogy is bad and you should feel bad.
Oh, Mikhail, I
Stop,
hate
Mikhail.
when you do this to analogies. You are so left-brained that I don't think you have a right side. But I agree with Mark's point. I've always thought that, wow, we built a brand new stadium with a lot of money while people slept on the street and educators were paid $30,000 a year, which is pitiful by today's standards, honestly. It's so little money compared to what you could get from a field that, by and large, is not having as big of an impact on our society. Our educators are shaping who our next generation is, creating the people that are going to run things after we're gone. Why would we want it to just be mediocre or less?
And this brings me to my largest frustration, which is the majority of the people that I interact with don't think logically 100% of the time, myself included.
I think thinking logically 100% of the time destroys who we are as humans.
Humans don't do that. We're very bad at that calculation.
So why are you complaining about stadiums then?
What?
Well, if humans shouldn't be thinking logically 100% of the time, then why is building a huge stadium for the glory of sports Why are you surprised?
No one's saying that we're surprised.
Mikhail, only Siths deal in extremes, Mikhail.
Jack,
You say that the
first off,
alternative.
you're comparing me to a Sith. Second off, you got the quote wrong. It's frustrating. You frustrate me, Jack.
Mikhail, you frustrate me. So at least we have that going for us.
No, it's only the Sith deal in absolutes,
Well,
which is an absolute statement which I find hilariously inconsistent.
no, it's just a commentary on the fact that the Jedi are almost no better than the Sith at times.
I know,
But through
it's a
through
Jedi
the
who
horrors
says
of bureaucracy.
that.
What I was gonna say is, you make it sound like the only alternative to 100% logic 100% of the time is allowing for huge,
Idiocies.
yeah, idiocies. Brutal word. I didn't know what word to use, and I probably wouldn't have landed on idiocies, but that's fine.
I'm not sure if it's a word.
It is.
Is it?
I think so. No, idiocy isn't.
Things that don't make
No.
a whole lot of sense.
It is the plural of idiocy.
Cool.
Okay.
You are correct. We learned 2 new words today. Idiocy is exoteric.
So good.
But anyway, my point was just there is a little bit more gray area in which, yes, there can be. Because, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, is art really necessary for society? Not really. Like, it doesn't really contribute, but, like, what is life without a little bit of art? Yes, you're progressing faster, but are you, like, enjoying what existence is? And isn't the enjoyment part of it? Or is it not part of it? Is that part of how unadvanced us human primates are? That we still value feeling good?
I
Well, and
think
that's
that-
kind of what I was.
You know
thinking
what?
about-
No, I'm hijacking this.
Oh.
Mark,
Ooh.
Let me-
So what
let me
I
say
think is
something.
that.
Oh my
if-
gosh. Boys,
ahead,
play
Mikhail.
nice.
okay, well,
Okay,
I think...
so what I. Okay, I'm done.
Are you?
Yeah.
That
Really?
was so good.
Yep.
That was so good. Mikhail, go for it, please. If you remember what you were going to say, I really want to hear it.
It's frustrating to me how often people use plural pronouns when talking about the human race. Like, we built this, we did this. It's like, no, you weren't part of that. A couple individuals did this, or like a certain group of individuals made this action possible. But how can you possibly speak for a group of people unless you know that all of them are in agreement with what you say? So I feel like talking about how society does something is just ridiculous because society isn't a thing, even though we love to anthropomorphize it. It's like society doesn't do things, individuals do things.
Yeah, it does. Society does things through individuals. It's like how bodies achieve goals through movements of individual cells.
Yeah, but they all agree on a common goal, which is to maintain the form of the body. And I think all of our cells have a pretty good idea, if you'll allow me to anthropomorphize cells.
I will not.
You know what? Too bad. All the cells in
will
my body have a pretty good idea of what they're supposed to maintain. They're supposed to maintain bodily functions. And they do it pretty well, in my opinion. But society, if I can make a bad analogy, doesn't have any clear goal. There is no overarching goal for society. There's no structure that is trying to be maintained.
Well, I completely disagree with you.
Okay, how?
All that society is are people trying to maintain or achieve some sort of norm or something. Not everyone's working together by any means. Just like there are, certain things in your body that are meant to Well, let's say there are certain things that are trying to make you feel good. There are things in your body that are responsible for keeping you healthy and ultimately helping you survive and feel okay.
Yeah.
Well, those same things sometimes cause you undue stress through, let's say, uh, issues within your bowel movements that make you feel uncomfortable, and then you're sad for a while. But ultimately, it's for the good.
Funny example.
Okay? Funny example. All I'm saying is that there are, in any of these situations, things that are trying to change something or maintain it. And that's all, that's what society is. Are factions of people who say, no, we're fine just the way we are and let's keep it how we are. And there are people saying, no, 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 we need to change it to this. And all this is happening at certain levels where, on, let's say, a podcast level, I am trying to keep a topic the same for something, blah, 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 blah. And in like a residential level in my hall, I am trying to maintain a certain level of decorum among the residents here.
Level of decorum.
While some freshmen are very adamant about adjusting that. While I agree with you, Mikhail, that societies are not people, they are not organisms that think necessarily on their own at a certain scale. They do have facets of them that are thinking and arguing and trying to work towards something, even if they don't all agree.
I think this difference in opinion between Mark and I and Mikhail is, again, on the optimism versus cynicism argument from earlier. I think that is the best one-sentence explanation for how this conversation and the past conversation followed about the same structure, where Mark or I said something, and then Mikhail disagreed with that person, and then the other one immediately agreed with that person or verbally, explicitly disagreed with Mikhail.
And I would say that that's a gross generalization.
I think I am qualified to make sweeping generalizations by my inherent confidence.
Good.
Oh no.
During your entire conversation, you two, I didn't interject anything for a while. And my opposite side of the issue was, well, I mean, I like to think that, like, all of society is working towards something or is supposed to be, but has, like, just distractions, I guess. But at the same time, I know that realistically, the vast majority of people on Earth don't care at all whether society progresses. They just want to make it for themselves. And so, is the progress of society the accumulation of billions of daily efforts to sustain people's lives? Is that what a society of contributors is, by definition?
I feel like this all depends on what level we're talking about.
I'm talking population of the planet.
Okay.
Society as a whole.
Well, you tell me, confident sweeping generalizations, man.
I think when you zoom out to the world perspective,
Yeah.
it becomes very muddy what the common goal would be, if not just general survival of the human race, but that is also equally debatable because you can zoom in on parts of the world where that is human survival is not being upheld by any means. There are war zones all over and violence is happening constantly.
I was just thinking on a global scale, climate change.
Seems like our goal.
No, as in the what would put into doubt the goal of continued survival of the human race is the not exactly, strong concern with climate change on a systemic level.
That's true. That's a perfect example of distraction by short-term goals that get in the way of what you'd think biologically would be our long-term goals, which is ensuring survival, ensuring, I don't know, genetic ancestry, passing on our genes and creating more Little baby humans.
Increasing fitness.
Ooh.
I took a biology class in high school.
Make it to those fitness peaks.
But stairs, Mark.
Ah, they're
Stairs
mountains.
are my enemy.
Oh, boo-hoo.
Mountains. I love mountains. Mikhail, remember when we were in the mountains?
It was pretty neat.
I liked the mountains. I was poking a snowbank in a t-shirt. Oh, also in August.
Okay, yeah, but I'm saying, like, I could go outside right now and poke a snowbank in a t-shirt.
In January, can't beat my story, Mikhail. I was on a mountain.
I was there. It happened. I got it. All right.
And then I threw a rock, and then I got yelled at. Because you guys said I was going to cause an avalanche. Which is fair.
Something that I've been thinking about throughout this conversation, and I guess for just in general for a while, is what is the point of it all? I guess I was trying to express my frustration at the fact that I was having trouble coming up with an answer to this, because there really is no common goal. At least I can't find one. I guess I've come to the conclusion that until like that situation changes, I just want to do the things that I find enjoyable, which I realize are different from many other people, like what they find enjoyable.
Mhm.
So I enjoy learning about things. I'm really glad that I found that out, because it makes, the whole decision to go to college, it makes a lot more sense to me now. I'm glad that I do enjoy this, because otherwise it would be just a lot of money for something that I didn't quite enjoy. I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling at this point.
Isn't that what a podcast is? Rambling about a topic?
Yeah. All right, that's fair.
Yeah, I'll defend you, Mikhail.
I won't.
Thanks, Mark.
Mark is thoroughly disappointed by lack of cohesion of your argument.
The art of explanation, Mikhail.
Got him.
All right. Well, I like learning about things, so I want to continue to do that. And I guess the way that human society is structured right now gives me a finite number of paths that I can attempt to follow to get towards my goal of learning things.
What would you define as a path towards learning things?
A situation in which I would be exposed to new ideas. So, I guess what I'm specifically thinking of is a semi-permanent position that hopefully provides me with enough income to provide the needs that this human body has, like water and sleep and, comforts like a place to have my things, and my toaster and my TV and my steel-belted radials. Anyway, so I guess I would like to progress through the next couple of years in a way that would allow me to get to a situation where learning things is a stable state in my life.
Become a teacher with me, Mikhail. Summer is off. Do projects.
Oh, summer would be incredible.
Yeah,
That'd be an
dude.
incredible thing. I'm not going to do it, though. I'm sorry, Mark.
You said you wanted to eventually.
Someday. That's like a post-retirement idea.
I see.
Once I am economically comfortable. Not that you can't be economically comfortable as like a... Are you talking about like
No clue. Teaching at some level.
teaching at some level? That's fair.
Yep.
Because if I were to be a teacher, I would not want to be at like a professor level. I would like to teach calculus, calculus at the high school level. Try and
Sure.
actually spur some thinkers from the group that are just taking it to get college credit like a bunch of nerds.
So,
Yeah.
what would you do differently?
I don't know. I love math, so I think the enthusiasm itself helps a lot. I think starting in pre-calculus was when I actually began to enjoy math concepts, maybe because of how it might have been how it was taught to me a little bit differently, because it was more outside resources than just the textbooks, which was like a big contrast from the earlier classes, or if it was just that the concepts finally got interesting. But I just want to almost head people off at the pass and try to show what mathematics is to them early on and try to entice people to actually pursue it, knowing what it is and not just riding on an IQ that lets them do math in their head.
For anyone who doesn't know, Jack is really good at doing arithmetic in his head.
Thanks, Mikhail.
You're welcome.
Quick, Jack, what's